Hey, welcome back everyone. In our last video, we finished creating our apps and we added some models into our apps. And one thing I wanted to do was I wanted to add a drop-down menu for adding film certification. So we'll just do a quick demonstration on how to do that, and then we'll move on to making our functions for our homepage and then details for each individual film. So we'll start off then by first going to our models, and where we have, for example, certification, we want some choices. So just above that here, I'm going to create a list called certs, or certs. And then what we'll do is we'll add some choices. So we're going to say, let's say choice one and choice one, and that should be, let's say, for example, say you. And if I just copy and paste that, off the top of my head, I think that's okay. UPG, what am I missing? Anyway, I can come back to it if needs be. Then what we want to do is we want to look here where we have our certificates and where we have a max length of 3. We also want to say choices is equal to certs. So we're going to hit save. And then we're going to try and refresh that. Well, let's try to remigrate. We haven't added any films to our database yet. So let's say Python manage.py make migrations. Length is too small. Film choice certificates, max length is too small. Oh, okay, my bad. Sorry, should have been the other way around. Okay, so actually what we'll just do is we'll make this a little simpler. We'll just name them the same. 15. So the length of each field is a maximum of 3. So choice 1, 2, and 3, 4. That wasn't suitable. So we've saved it. Let's try that one more time. There we go. So we've made the update there, and then we'll just migrate. Right, now that that's done, let's run our server one more time. And if we just test this out, so if we go to our admin server, if we refresh this now where we've got certificate, hopefully we'll have a drop down menu. And we do. Okay, so now when we're choosing our films, we can say what the certificate is, what classification. So right, having said that, that we could do more. So for example, we could also go to the extra effort of having more than one choice allowed to be filled into genre, and we could have a similar sort of, not a drop down menu, but maybe a radio box, not radio box, a tick box, where you're able to select some of the genres, because sometimes a film isn't just comedy, it could also be action or, you know, romance. And I think for the simplicity of this demonstration, I'm going to leave that out this time. Okay, so let's move on. If we go back to the home page, what we're presented with still is this sort of Django basic page, just to let you know that your project is running. We want to replace that now with a home page. So to do that, if we go back to here for a second, we can tick off that. And we now want to start looking at this. So we're going to create a home page for ourselves. To do that, let's go to views. So if we go to here, and if I close that down, if we open up models, views, what we want to do is we want to create a function for homepage. So create a function for homepage, and it takes a request. We'll talk about in just a moment. I'll mention what requests are in slightly more detail. And oh, before I do that, here I should import the models. So we should say from dot. So from this directory, import. No, actually, from this directory models, import film, and I believe it was rating. So that's fine. And here in our function now, what we want to be able to do is we want to collect in the home page, we want to collect all the films because we're going to list them. So we're going to say films equals, and we're going to refer to the film object, the film table. And we're going to say objects.all. So it's going to collect all the film objects. And then we're going to create a context. So this is how we pass data into our HTML template. We're going to say context equals curly brackets, and we'll say films is referring to the films variable that we just created. So then after that, we're now going to say return and render, please. Return and render the request, whatever the request was, which again we'll speak about in more detail. And we're going to need a template. So our template is going to be in our films directory inside, yeah, that's correct, our films, and we'll just call it homepage.html. And also, as well as the page, which we haven't created yet, by the way, we want to pass in the context. Okay, so this might not make so much sense just yet. So before I carry on, let's first of all create that basic template. So this will replace this Django page. At the moment, when we make a request for the home page, we're just getting this, and now we're about to replace that. So to do that, let's go to our films folder and we'll create a file. That file must be in a folder called templates. So it's got to be called templates, it's got to be called films, and then it's going to be called homepage.html. Right. And then just to make sure that it works, let's just create a template, and we'll just inside the body here, we'll just say, let's have a heading. Let's say IMDb clone, or maybe I'll have a better name for it as we go along. And we'll just say list goes here. So let's save that. Okay, now I've done a template as well. So basically, when we go to our views, when we load the homepage, what we want to happen is we want all the films to be gathered from the database. We want that to be loaded into the context. And then when we render that request, we want it to render that data in the homepage HTML and include that context. So now what we need to do is we need to create a URL for this, a URL pattern. So to do that, we're going to type in path, and our path is going to be just a blank string, because we want this homepage to appear when there's no extension, when nothing is added to the base URL, the base path. So, from here, obviously this isn't going to work, because we need to, from this directory and views, import, and I can say film. Yeah, that's no. What am I doing? Import homepage. There we go. Right. So now from here, we're going to say homepage, and we'll give this a name as well. So we'll say name of this, but let's just keep it short. We'll call it home. And that's our first URL pattern in our films app. Okay, so now we have that, we can probably test it out. So now we know that if nothing is added to the URL, then it should load this function called homepage, which will be found here, which will load all the films from the models. It will feed it into a context, and then it will render it. Now what will happen is, if you remember, if we look back here, we've only got a heading that says IMDb clone, and then list goes here. We don't have any films in our homepage yet, but let's give this a go, right? So let's open up our homepage. Now when we refresh, there we go. We have our IMDb clone, and it says list goes here. We don't have any films yet, so maybe what we'll do is we'll add some in just a moment. Yeah, let's do that actually. So I'll do that, and then I'm going to speed this up as I go along. Right, so we have our first film saved, but if I go to the home page, this isn't going to show up right now. So we want to replace that with the list, okay, list of films. So I'm just going to say, let's go back to our home page here, and let's get rid of it here where it says that. Oops. Let's add a horizontal line then let's add our first film. So to keep it simple, actually, I'm just going to give the title of the film. So I'm going to say film. In fact, what we should do is we should run a for loop within our HTML page. So we're going to say for film in films. So don't forget that we use the context. In the context, we pass through the variable films, which will be a collection of all the films saved in our database. At the moment, we've only got one, but that doesn't matter. So we're saying for film in films, and then what I'll do here is I'll end the film, end the for, oops, end for, and for, I believe it's like that. All right. Can you hear my cat meowing? And I'm just going to say that we want to say film dot, was it title or was it name? It was title. So I'll just go back to here and save. Now, if we, that end4 should be 1, no spaces. All right, so now if we go back to our home page and refresh, now we've got our horizontal line and we've got our first film, Die Hard. Now I want to change the appearance of this, but I'll come back to that later. Okay, so now what I want to do is I also actually want to work on the detail page. So in the future, what we'll have is we'll have cards with all our films listed, maybe 3-4 films in a row, just like on IMDb. So we'll have something a bit like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe we'll have like 6 films, something like that, per row. And then we'll be able to click on the film or the poster. And actually we should display things like the rating as well, add to our watch list. And so what we'll do now is we'll just create the link so that when we click on a film, it should take us to the page with the details about that film. Okay. And again, we're not going to style it up right now. We're just going to create it. So let's go back to this and we'll now go to our views again, and we're going to create our second function. We're going to call this one, let's call this one film detail. And again, it takes a request. And I'm going to explain request in more detail. I did say this earlier. So our next thing is I want to include something called a, let's say, so the film is equal to get object or 404. So what this is basically is this is another Django shortcut in the same way that we load from our Django shortcuts where we have render, for example. And we just want to add get object of 404, and it enables us to interrogate the database and find the one object and then return that one object from the database. So we want to do that, and we are going to look for, in the film table, we're going to look for the film of the primary key of, let's just say, we'll call it PK for short, yeah? And so well, it is PK. So here, as we take a request, we're also going to take the primary key. So when we, let's go back to the browser just for a moment and just explain this. So when we load a film, when we load a page, we pass through data with it. Okay, so for example, if we were to go back, if I'm to click on any film here, for example, this one, any film I click on, as I click on it, it will have an ID along with this image or with this link. In fact, if we go back to this one, oh no, I can't show it here, but I will show it in just a moment actually. So in fact, you know what, let's go back to this. So Die Hard is our first film in our database. So as well as film title, let's just also pass through, let's say ID or primary key is equal to, and we'll do that, and we'll just say film dot ID, or is it PK? I think ID or PK will do. So now when I reload that, let's go back to here. Now when we reload that, we know that this ID is hardwired into this film. Yeah, because on the table, in the SQL table, it has the ID for where this is in the database. Now, what we want is when we click on the Die Hard film, the link here, we want it to load the page and it will pass that ID alongside it. I can delete that. I don't need it here. But it's when we're making a request to load the page, we're also going to pass in the primary key. And so that primary key is going to get passed into our function, and that primary key will be used to interrogate the database and find that object with from the films table with the primary key of 1. In our case, if we click on what do you call it? If we click on Die Hard, and I'm just going to borrow that, to be honest. I'm just going to make small changes to it. And we're also going to have a context again. This time we're going to say film instead of films. And we're going to change homepage to, let's just call it F detail. Okay. And then if we go to our templates folder, oops, make that just a bit wider for a second. In that folder, I want a new file, and I want it to be called fdetail.html. And we'll do the same thing again. So we'll just create a blank HTML. And in fact, so our title now, this will be interesting because for our title, we'll have a head H1, and our heading will be, we'll say film.title. Okay. And then let's throw in the blurb. Okay. So we'll say underneath it in a paragraph tag, we'll say film dot, oh, what did I call it? Was it blurb? If we go to models, it was overview, right? So we'll take that and we'll put that in here. And let's just see if that works. Okay, obviously, first of all, it's not going to work just yet because two things. First of all, let's create a link here. So we'll say a href, and we're going to do a Django link here. So we're going to say URL, and the URL will point to, in fact, I can't do that yet because I haven't made this up yet, but what we'll do is we'll call it, and we'll say from the films app. Okay, we want you to load, let's call it F detail. And we also want to pass through primary key. Oh, and that should be in, that should, oops, sorry. That should be, let's do single quotes. I think that should work. I'll double check in a second. And then what we'll do is we'll insert the title into the tag there. So if I save that, it's going to be a problem at the moment because we don't have that URL yet. So we've created our, if we close that for a second, if we created our view, film detail. So now what we want to do is pass that film detail and make another path. So first of all, we'll do that. So we're now also loading this new function, film detail. Let's borrow that so we don't type it all out again. This time we're going to have a small change. We're going to say film / and we'll just say that we want to load an integer, and the integer is going to be a primary key, and our function is going to be called film detail. And if you remember, we called it f_detail. So save that. Oh, and I've got to do one other thing. So I've got to give the app we're going to say app name equals, and we'll just call this one films. Now, this was mentioned in, if we go back to our views for a second, no, not our views, sorry, our homepage. When we did the URL, we said films. So that's going to refer to our app name. So if we had more apps, and we could have different names. So this will help help Django understand which URL is going to be looking for from which app. And we're going to load the app with the name of fdetail and with the primary key. So let's try that out. I believe that would be correct. So if we go back now, and if we reload the page, we should, oh no, it says F detail with arguments not found. Oh yes, my mistake. So when we refer to the primary key here, what we should be doing is referring to the primary key with the context of the film that was passed through to it. So if you remember, we are looking for film.pk. So because we're passing the film, each film is referred to as film. And so we're looking for that film and its PK, its primary key. So that should work. Let's go back again. Let's save that and let's reload. Let's go back. Oops, go to the home page. And when we click on it, it's taking us now to our new template with the film diehard and the details about the overview. Cool. So this video is about 20 or so minutes. And so I'm going to end this there. And in our next video, if we go back to here, we could say now that we've created our functions, however basic they are at the moment. We know it's all working. Well, we've created our URL patterns as well. Yeah, we've done that. And so set up a homepage, list and display films. We've kind of done that. We haven't created a base template. So to be honest, from here onwards, this is it's going to flesh out a lot more. So let's start by creating a base template. To do that, I'm going to pick a CSS framework. And I've listed a whole bunch here because I'm really not sure which ones to go for. I do want to try different ones. I suppose Bootstrap is the easiest one to just get up and go because it's very sort of feature enriched and its usage is widely covered. So anyway, let's jump into the next video and hopefully we'll create our base template. You'll understand what that is, how it's used, and we'll use a CSS framework and we'll actually start building up some more of our web page by adding a few more films as well. Okay, see you then.